I've got a special Nintendo arrival at the cave today to show you from 1986. Hello cave dwellers, yes, this is as heavy as it looks. Getting up to the top floor of the mill was going to be our first challenge, and the second would be hoping that it still worked by the time that we got it all the way up there. And this thing took all of our collective strength to get it up there. There's not one, but there's two monitors inside this arcade cabinet, and it is so heavy to lift. But thankfully it's quite narrow, so we could maneuver it around the stairwell, which has been a problem in the past with larger arcades such as Galaxian. That was a real struggle to get up here. But get it up here we did. You can see us on the final stretch here, the last flight of stairs to get it all the way up to the 4th floor. And with Richard and Alex's help, thankfully we made it. And today we can inspect it, and I can give you a tour of the Nintendo Playchoice-10, this one manufactured right here in the UK by a company by the name of Brent Leisure. We'd like to thank PCBWay.com for supporting our episode today. They aren't just about PCBs, although they do a tremendous job of that. They also offer CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication, 3D printing and injection molding. If you're creating, then PCBWay.com can help you bring your project to life. Get an instant quote now over at PCBWay.com, and we thank them for their support. And here it is in situ. I am overjoyed to have this in the cave and to be able to offer it to people to come and enjoy. Just look at it. It's in really nice condition. It's not the first Playchoice-10 that we've seen on the channel. Longer term viewers will remember a couple of years back we went over to the Swindon Museum of Computing and we helped them to repair and clean theirs up. And I'm pleased to say that it's still in service just 25 or 30 miles down the road from here. But now we've got our own for visitors to come and enjoy too. And I can't imagine there are many Playchoice-10s in a 30-mile radius around here. But now there are two. This is mine. I picked it up on eBay. The cost was £1,500. It wasn't a cheap pickup, especially when you start diving into forums and seeing that people were selling these for £100, £250, you know, at the turn of the millennium when nobody was interested in these things. So prices have skyrocketed, but it was still a pretty good deal considering everything that came with it, as you'll see when we open it up and look inside. How it works is that the 10 in Playchoice-10 means that you have a choice of 10 games or up to 10 games to play from, and games are referred to as channels. So you have a channel select button just above the main control panel here to pick the game that you want to play, and then you press enter when you've selected it. And then in the middle you've got game select and start. Those are just the select and start buttons that you would normally find on an NES joypad, because effectively inside here is Nintendo NES hardware. And then there's a reset button on the right hand side, which takes you back to the game choice menu. And you can change game mid-credit because this works on a system of time. You put your coins in, it charges up the clock, and you play until the time runs out. That's the whole idea behind this machine. Now, if you know about your Nintendos and you're based in the US, you might think this looks quite different to some of the other Playchoice systems that you will have seen over there, and there's a good reason for that. This one is made in England and it's by Brent Leisure. Brent Leisure, not a distant relative to Leisure Suit Larry, or at least I think not. And we can see the serial number on the back here, 14775. And I'm pretty sure, do correct me in the comments if I'm wrong here so that we can all learn, but I'm pretty sure this type of cabinet was not made in the US. It was made here in the UK. I've seen it in France, I've seen it in Europe, and I'm pretty sure those were exported from Brent Leisure, so manufactured in the UK. So I think this style of cabinet is a very British style. But if anyone can correct me and point me out to seeing these in the US and made in the US in this style, I will pin the comment so everyone can learn from that. North America did get various styles of cabinets to house the Playchoice though, including conversion kits to convert another earlier NES-based arcade, and that was called the Versus Uni system. The Versus system itself had various form factors, including the red tent, which was one that you could sit at, and the whole idea was that you could play NES games head-to-head on them. So those came out first, and then there was a conversion kit for the Versus Uni system, which would allow you to turn it into a Playchoice-10. And prior to that, the Versus Uni system had its own conversion kit, which would allow you to convert earlier Nintendo arcade cabinets, such as Donkey Kong, into the Versus Uni system using that cabinet. And there were also conversion kits for Punch-Out, Super Punch-Out and Arm Wrestling, which were all dual monitor arcades. And it's reported that those games came about as a result of Nintendo having excess monitor stock in the wake of the success of Donkey Kong and overambitious ordering. So those two could be turned into Playchoice systems. So in short, you could take your Nintendo Punch-Out arcade, you could put a Playchoice-10 conversion kit in there, you could put a Punch-Out cartridge in there, and you could play the inferior NES version of Punch-Out on your converted arcade rather than the superior arcade version that you had originally. Got it? Brilliant. Anyway, what we've got here is the Playchoice-10 Super Deluxe. And this wasn't the only system which I think is unique to our shores, because Brent Leisure clearly thought they could get a better profit margin on the Playchoice, and it produced what I would describe as the Portaloo or Porta Potty of arcade games. They called this the Player's Choice, not the Playchoice-10. Also made in 1986, and this is made out of moulded plastic, and it features a single monitor. Just look at that monstrosity. This one you rarely see. I certainly never saw it back in the day, but they do come up from time to time, and they're sought after by hardcore collectors, but it's not to my taste. So as we inspect our machine, there was a sticker on the back that caught my eye next to the Brent Leisure plate, and it tells a nice bit of history. It's this levy paid sticker, and on it is the name BACTA, or the British Amusement Catering Trades Association. So BACTA are a trade organisation who tried to help protect, promote and grow the industry. And I had a chance to speak to its CEO. They're still active today, a chap by the name of John White. And he said, that's a sticker I haven't seen for a long time. So I asked him to explain to me what it was all about. And apparently back in the day, what happened was British arcade manufacturers would buy a roll of stickers. They would pay £1 per sticker up front. And a sticker would go on every cabinet. And then that £1 would be added to the invoice of every sale of every arcade. And that was the levy. That would be passed straight on to BACTA to help them in their goal of supporting the industry. Now, John tells me it worked pretty well through the 80s. It was around about 1986 that it came in, up to the early 90s, when quite simply people just stopped paying it. They refused to pay it. And that really goes hand in hand with the decline of the UK arcade manufacturing industry. So it's not really a surprise that it started happening then. But for a period, that £1 levy really helped to support and drive the industry through BACTA's hard work. Let's continue inspecting the machine then. At the top of the machine, we've got our coin mechanism, and there's this large plastic bezel which goes all the way around the monitor, and I'm really pleased to see it's got no cracks in it. If you look closely, there are a couple of scratches, but nothing that won't buff out with a bit of polish, but it looks nice. It's got a small marquee at the top, and that is interchangeable, because in theory you could just put one game in this cabinet and you could have a game specific Punch-Out or Metroid or whatever marquee that you wanted to put up there. We've also got a couple of speakers, and then that monitor, that Game Select monitor, is a 10-inch display. Now I do look inside the machine before I turn it on, just to make sure I'm not going to do anything stupid and blow anything up. But through the magic of editing, we'll dip in and out of later in the day when you can see this thing running, just so you can get a better idea of how it works. So here's the top monitor on now. The purpose of this is to show you the choice of games. The marquee comes on, the system loads up, and there we see that choice of games appear. And the little faces on the right indicate whether this game is single player, two player, co-op. The little symbols there to tell you whether you can play that with a friend. We'll talk more about these specific games later, but I believe there are 52 official titles for this. Some sources quote 54, but looking at the additional games in their lists, I think they include some of the aftermarket hacking that's needed to make some of those games work. So I'm going to stick with 52. If we select a game using the channel select and enter buttons, what happens then is we see the instructions for that game appear on the monitor. Sometimes just text, sometimes multiple pages, and you have to press enter to cycle through them, and sometimes there's images as well in those instructions. I can also see that we've got 0 time, so unless I'm going to put money in this thing all day, I do need to find out how to set it to free play. It wasn't the only type of machine like this I remember seeing in the arcade. The big one, of course, is Neo Geo. You had a single slot MVS, or you had the multi-slot ones, and I particularly remember a 4-slot one that was in my local arcade. You had little square marquees for each game at the top, and then you could select the game that you wanted to play. Sega had one in its Megatech, which was Mega Drive based. And Nintendo also followed this up with a Super Nintendo based one, the Super System, but I never saw that, and you really very, very rarely ever see that come up these days. That's a super rare collectible. Let's have a poke around inside the cabinet now, starting from the front on the right hand side. This door is where all the money lives. If I put a coin in when the machine is turned on, it will drop into these tubes. There are 4 tubes, and it will separate out the different coins if you wanted it to, and it will go all the way down the cabinet in these pipes, all the way down there, and drop out the bottom here into the coin box. A coin box in which today we find a bag, a heatsink, a little bit worrying, a lock, and some coins, including the old, larger 10p piece, which is no longer in circulation. This box might also have had dividers in to keep the different coins separated. If we look under that, there's a play counter, and apparently this cabinet has played 104,220 games, so it's more than earned its money's worth, I think. The little white switch on the left there is it's a kill switch. It kills the power if you open the door. It's common to find these dotted all around the arcades. So let's see what's in the next door now. This is where the party's at. We're greeted by a volume dial and a credit button, and peering deeper inside behind that, we can see the system board and we can see all the games loaded up in it. There they all are, waiting very patiently to be played, all lined up nicely. So you can immediately see that these aren't your standard NES home cartridges in here, hence why there's only 52-ish titles to play on the system. The whole board does conveniently pull out for easy access, so that's what we'll do now. And in doing so, I did find another unexpected freebie caught up in the wiring loom. That chip there, with slightly bent legs, appears to be a Gold Star branded Z80 CPU, and there's nothing missing from the system board, so it's just got left in there by someone. I'd be surprised if it works, but I will put it to one side to test at some point. The games there all plug into a standard 96-pin DIN connector on the system board, which are labelled channel 1 to channel 10. So let's take out the games and inspect them. There's 10 of them that I'll take out the machine, and I've also got some additional spares with me, so we'll put those all on the table for a closer look. And you can see just at first glance that they vary in length. Something like Super Mario here is a half-length PCB, and it's got 3 EPROMs on it, whereas something like Punch-Out over here is double the length. Punch-Out still endorsed by Mike Tyson at this point. And this one's also got a battery backup, so it can hold the scores on there even when the machine's turned off. That battery, I'm sure, has expired, so I'll just take a moment to pop that out and pop a new one in. There we go, I can save all of those massive scores I'm sure to get on Punch-Out. Here's a flavour of a few more. We've got Contra, a game I'm terrible at. We've got Ninja Gaiden, Track and Field. That one will really test the buttons out. And here now is Super Mario 3. And I've got that very same game on a regular NES cartridge. So here they are side by side, and I can open up that cartridge just to give you a glance at the difference. And some of the additional EPROMs on the Playchoice version of the game, well, that will be used for the instructions that we see on the top monitor. And that explains the size difference on these cartridges, or at least some of it. The game itself on those EPROMs is identical to the home system, and it is possible to swap out EPROM chips on the boards in some instances with regular NES games. So for example, if I had the ROM with the home version of baseball on, I could put that on the tennis Playchoice game card and it would run. But if I put that same ROM in the track and field PCB, then it just wouldn't work. It has to be a specific combination with the right chips to support that game. So Spy Hunter, for example, that can go on track and field and that will work. In the modern day, there is an NES adapter that can just fit into the DIN slot and then you can put NES cartridges in, but that's not a road I really want to go down at the moment. I want to enjoy these original Playchoice carts and let people play on the original thing, even if they wouldn't actually notice if it was a NES cartridge or not. I would know it's in there. There were also 3 light gun games in the library: Duck Hunt, Hogan's Alley and Wild Gunman. And a regular NES Zapper can have the connector hacked to plug into the Playchoice-10, and apparently that will work. You'd often see cabinets with more robust arcade light guns holstered to it as standard. Back inside our cabinet now, while the main board is Nintendo branded, there's also a Brent Leisure branded daughter board, and that's where a Z80 is in use. So there is a Z80 in here somewhere, even though there wasn't one on the original NES. And that handles the game menu and the instructions up on the top monitor. So let's put that back together then, get all the games back in there and slide it back into place, hopefully all working. And then let's have a look around the back and then we'll fire up some games. The main gaming monitor is a 20-inch tube and the top one is a 10-inch tube. And I did spot a problem as soon as I opened up the back of this cabinet. The board for adjusting the monitor, well, that's just kind of flapping about there. That should be attached to the main chassis. The screw is present, but it's come loose in transit, or perhaps from us humping it up the stairs. That's more than likely. And I did try to reattach it, but the hole looks like it's had a larger screw forced into it at some point or something. It just won't take the original screw, and I don't have anything that will fit there. So to get around this, I just moved the bracket along to another screw hole on the chassis, and then used the self-tapping screw to put the bracket back into the chipboard and secured the daughter board to the chassis there. I might come back and add some cable ties for good measure, but at least it's not in danger of flopping down into the system board or dropping on the PSU, so I'm a bit happier with that now. Up top is that 10-inch monitor, and next to it is something called a Zenith Echo, which is complete with RS-232 cable for programming. And apparently Echo stands for Electronic Coin Handling Optimizer. So that's handling your credits when the coins go in. There we go, you can see our 10p, our old 10p in fact is accepted and puts time on the clock, as is our 20p. And later I did set the dip switches to free play, and that just sets the time to an unlimited amount. Nothing but 9s, as you can see there. So it's in good condition. Not a huge surprise because it was sold to me as working and I got to see some pictures in advance, but it's nice to see that it survived all the way here, particularly up those stairs. So let's fire it up and let's see how it looks and play some games. This one's Mike Tyson's Punch-Out!, one of my favourites in this selection here, and clearly this is the NES and not the arcade, because our fighter, I think his name is Little Mac, he's a wireframe character on the original arcade, I seem to remember, and not on here. And that's the thing about the Playchoice. In the cave in 2023, it's brilliant. But when I saw it in arcades, I'd sooner put my money in a real arcade, in quotes, than I would in this. I could go to my mate Mike's house and play NES games if I wanted, and sometimes I'd get a sandwich when I was there too. And that didn't cost me anything. And Gauntlet is another example of that, an arcade game that I would sooner put money in the real arcade in than the NES version in a Playchoice-10. This game moves really quickly on the NES. Quester the elf, he can actually run past his arrows after shooting them, which I really don't remember doing in the arcades. But if we change our mindset a little bit and consider this to be a premium NES, well, that's when it comes into its own. The Playchoice has RGB video output. The NES at home only had a composite output, so it looks different. Mario's dungarees look redder, the skies look bluer. I really like how it looks. Now, that is subjective. Some people will prefer the muted original tones that they're used to, but I think this looks great. And people found that they could rip the PPU, or picture processing unit, out of the Playchoice board, and they would retrofit it onto their NES consoles to get that RGB output and have that same experience at home. Another game, and one of the earlier ones in the selection, which I really enjoy here, is the home port of Kung Fu Master, which plays really well, despite this totally unfair boss battle that happened here. The more I play this, the more I enjoy it. When we played arcade games at home, we tried everything to make it more arcade perfect, different joysticks, taking our systems down to the big telly in the lounge, hooking it up to the family hi-fi. And this thing, it does all of those in one. I walk up to this to play NES games, not to play arcade games, and to play them in a way that I really enjoy them, not with little rectangular joypads. And I didn't own an NES back in the day, so I don't have huge nostalgia for those joypads. You may, but I walk up to it to play them with joysticks, arcade quality joysticks, with a huge screen and lovely audio that pumps out of this cabinet at ear level. All of the things that made me think I'm not going to put my money in this as a kid are the very things that make me love it right now here in the cave. And I can't wait to open the cave this weekend and let people have a go on it and see how they feel about it. But all in all, inspecting it, apart from that daughter board that had come loose on the back of the monitor, it's in good condition. I think it's going to serve us well, fingers crossed, and we'll take good care of it. Now, this isn't the only arcade of its type that I've come across recently, because I've been looking for another one, a Sega Megatech, which is the Sega Mega Drive version of this. Again, it's dual screen. Might be made by Brent Leisure. I need to do my research, but it looks very similar to this cabinet. And I've been looking for years. I have had an eBay search set for years to find one of these things. And I put out a tweet recently saying, can anybody put me onto one? And I got a reply, and I think I've secured one. I think I found one. So it's going to be a long drive to collect that and bring it up here. And if I do, I will of course share it with you. And that will be another really nice way in that instance to share Sega Mega Drive games and tell the Mega Drive story in a kind of premium experience way that you wouldn't have experienced at home. Very few will have in the arcades. And tell that story and put it side by side with this. And it doesn't clash with what's happening in the arcade archive, because they are effectively home systems and not arcades. So as soon as I get that, I'll share it with you. And it's just a really nice addition to the collection here. Hopefully I'll see some of you guys here soon to come and try it out. As always, thank you for taking the time to watch, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.